Welcome to the Ice Storm edition of the Wednesday evening devotional at the Glendale Road Church of Christ. I hope you're warm. I hope you have power and that you've stocked up and are ready should the worst come. Praying that it doesn't, but it's better to be ready than to not be. This evening, we're going to talk about the unexpected. When the Jews had lived under captivity of the Babylonians, they'd probably grown accustomed to the way the Babylonians did things. And then after the Babylonians were conquered by the Persians, they were faced probably with some similar but new challenges. But there's a story from the book of Esther where the unthinkable, really the unexpected, came and it faced them square in the face. And so we read about this in Esther chapter 3, verses 12 through 15. The king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and a decree was written according to all that Haman commanded to the king's satraps, to the governors who were over each province, to the officials of all the people, to every province according to its script, and to every people in their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus it was written and sealed with the king's signet ring. And the letters were sent by couriers into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their possessions. A copy of the document was to be issued as law in every province, being published for all people, that they should be ready for that day. The couriers went out, hastened by the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in Shushan, the citadel. So the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Shushan was perplexed. Haman was a person who didn't really like the Jews, and what really led to this particular story, if you're familiar with the book of Esther, had to do with the king Ahasuerus or Xerxes elevating Haman to a very prominent position, and as he rode through the streets, people would bow down and just give him some sort of veneration. But Mordecai, the Jew, refused to do so because he was Jewish. And so this hostility that Haman had with the Jewish people boiled over into his talking the king into issuing this decree. Now, at the beginning of the story of Esther, was just a young lady, and the king at the time had a wife named Vashti. He had a party, and he and all the nobles of the realm came together, and they were plied with strong drink, and they called for Vashti, the king did, and he wanted her to kind of show herself off in front of all of his buddies, which was probably something beneath her dignity to do, which was why she refused it. So the king became very angry and put her away. And then thereafter, he had kind of a Miss Persia contest. He sent throughout all the realm to bring in the prettiest of women who had all sorts of skills and various other abilities. And the one that he chose at the end was Esther. And he married her, but he didn't realize that she was a Jew. So when this edict is issued and proclaimed throughout all the empire, Esther learns of this, and they have about the span of a year before it's to take place and all the Jews are to be annihilated. This was unexpected. And so what do you and I do when the unexpected comes? Last year and all that it entailed was unexpected. Here we are, February, the 10th, and come March the 15th, will have been a year since we last met in this building as an entire church family, without masks, without social distancing, and without any of the worries of the pandemic, because we didn't know enough to know differently then. But yet, for almost a year, we have lived in unexpected circumstances. But even though we've lived in these unexpected circumstances, we've learned a lot about ourselves. And as a church, we've learned a lot about ourselves as a congregation. And there are some things that I hope we have learned that we never go back to. We need to leave behind any bad habit that we may have had, and anything that we may have cultivated throughout this time, we need to hold dear. And I think one of the things that we have learned is that one of the main differences between us and others who haven't been able to adopt very well to the past year and the unexpected has been that we realize that the church building does not have to be the central focus of where all ministry happens. As a matter of fact, in Scripture, we read in 1 Peter 2:5, him writing to the Christians saying, "You yourselves, like living stones, are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ." Those of us who have survived during this time, but even thrived during this unexpected season of life, we've recognized that our building isn't as essential as we may have made it out to be in times past. March 15th, the last Sunday we met in here without any of the trappings of the last year of unexpected restrictions, was the very first Sunday that we, if you may recall, that we met after the entire remodel of this auditorium. We have new carpet, new paint, fresh paint, new pews, a brand new audio-visual system that was installed a few months before then, and had that not occurred, we wouldn't have been able to adapt as well as we have been able to do so in this season. So when this is over and we're allowed to go back to the way things were, we need to realize that a lot of ministry can happen outside of the church building. That isn't to say that the building is unimportant, but we've probably learned that we probably placed way too much emphasis on the building for ministry itself. Again, the building can be used in that way, but because things were shut down because of social distancing, I think we've realized that ministry can occur outside here. Sometimes I will get a call or a text, someone stopped by to see you, this person stopped by to see you, and I try to be here. I'm off on Monday, so Tuesday through Friday I'm in the office off and on, but when I'm not in the office during those days, it's because I'm out meeting someone or I have an appointment somewhere to meet with a group, and people go, "Well, I thought the preacher would always be at the church building." Well, the reality is not all ministry happens inside these four walls. If it did, then the people in the hospital, I'd say, bring them to me. The people in the hospice house, bring them to me. The people that are shut in, bring them to me. But the reality is a lot of ministry happens outside of this building. And, if ever you come by during the week and I'm not here, it's usually because I'm out ministering to somebody somewhere. And I hope that we have learned that as much of a blessing as this beautiful building can be, and as thankful as we can be for it, not all ministry has to revolve around these four walls. The second thing that I think we've learned is to not have an obsession with attendance and numerical increase. As a matter of fact, here recently on Sunday mornings, Gary will announce the number from the previous Sunday morning, and that number has been dramatically increasing in slow, small increments. But before the pandemic, it wasn't uncommon for us to have anywhere between 650 to 750 people on a Sunday morning in this place. But now we're elated when we have 350. Why is that? We looked at numbers oftentimes as a measure of success. But during this pandemic and the unexpected, we have seen attendance decline, and thankfully, though attendance has declined, that doesn't mean that people aren't being Christians. And so we can't place upon the brethren the sole test of Christianity as being attendance. It is important, and I obviously highly encourage it in as much as a person can do so safely out of concern for their health during this time. But to be a thriving church, we have to learn to see health and growth by what the church, the people, the members of this body do and have done, and not just how many have come together. This, after all, is the purpose of those in particular offices within the congregation. We read in Ephesians 4:11 and 12 that the Lord gave some to be apostles and prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers. Why? Look at verse 12. For the equipping of the saints, for the work of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. So we don't have to go back to measuring the health and the strength of a congregation by the number of people that are in attendance, because we have seen that during this unexpected season of our life, many of our brethren have been very active in doing ministry. Some have taken food and prescriptions to those who are unable to get out. Some have provided transportation to and from doctor's appointments. Some have made meals and taken them to people. Some have even called or written cards to our shut-ins. So there are various ways to do ministry. And, at least from my perspective and a lot of the great things that I've heard, I've been very excited to hear all the good of the various brothers and sisters of this congregation that they're doing. And that is a great measure of success. However, I do look forward to the day when we can have 650 to 750 people back here. But even until then, because the attendance is low, it doesn't necessarily mean that the health of the congregation is in peril, because there are so many people who are out doing the work of ministry and serving. Now, another thing that we could probably dispense with as a bad habit, the first two that I've mentioned is relying solely on the building to do ministry. Secondly, having an obsession with attendance and numerical increase. But third, this is a bad habit I think we should get rid of, and that is thinking that we have a clue about what's coming next. If there's anything that you and I have learned over this past unexpected year, it's that we cannot anticipate what's coming. I feel sorry for some preachers because a lot of them made a, if you will, kind of a theme for the year 2020, and that theme was 2020 vision or 2020 focus, talking about 2020 eyesight. And I'm pretty sure that theme and some of those sermons didn't age too well. And I'm not against planning or organizing or making some sort of theme or casting a vision for the future. But this last year we have learned really to hold loosely to our plans. But the good thing about that is we've also been able to adapt, and we have been able to arise to the occasion as they have come. We're reminded in Scripture in James chapter 4, verses 13 through 16, "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we'll go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell, and make a profit. Whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It's even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil." We have no clue about what's coming next. Even today, as we face the prospect of an ice storm, as we've been told, the timelines have changed. It was supposed to begin at midnight last night, and then it was supposed to begin at 6 this morning, and now they're saying it won't begin until 2 this afternoon. Of course, I'm recording this at 9 in the morning, but the thing is, it keeps getting pushed. However, the point is to be prepared and adapt as much as we can. There are a few other bad habits we could dispense with moving forward, and that is, I think we've learned during this unexpected year to not hang on to any kind of dead program or practice. There are many church programs that are good and that are noteworthy. And some have had to be paused because of the pandemic. And, maybe some should be just done away with altogether. First, maybe we should ask, is anybody really missing this? Then maybe we should follow up that question with, would it be a real loss if we didn't restart A, B, or C, whatever the case is? There'll never be an easier time to simplify the congregation's ministries than now. And so this is an opportunity for us, if we identify dead programs or practices, to see if we need to hang on to it or to let it go. One of the things that I know this congregation did away with a long time ago was gospel meetings. And I was told that the reason for that is that there was scarcely any attendance at the last few. And so that was something that was decided to just do away with. You know, it's not that it's not a good idea, it's just not something that works well for this congregation and the makeup of this body. And that doesn't mean that our congregation isn't spiritually minded. It doesn't mean that we're deficient as Christians. That was a tradition, and it's okay to let traditions go. Secondly, we have to stop longing for the past. I'm as guilty of this as I think any of us are. We want to go back to normal, but there is no back to normal. There is what we have now and what we're going to be doing in the future. Every time we think about the good old days, when you look back to the good old days, we were always complaining about something, and now that we're in this position, we look back and we go, boy, I miss the good old days when X, Y, and Z. But the thing is, let's just be grateful for the day that God has given us today and for the future that He might give us to serve Him and to do whatever the case is in His service and in His ministry. But the final bad habit we should do away with is taking anything and anybody, I wish I would have added, for granted. I never thought, as I'm sure that you have, that we would go any span of time without assembling as a congregation, or that we would go any span of time without being able to see each other, shake hands, or feel comfortable hugging one another and just getting together as we once did. But one thing that we've learned from this last unexpected year, it's not to take even the most simple joys of life, our family and our faith, for granted. And so I hope that whenever we come out on the tail end of this, we can keep these things in mind. And as we face unexpected challenges, we rise to the occasion. And so as Esther and the Jews throughout the Persian Empire faced an unexpected reality, they had to reconcile themselves with it and decide what to do from there. They gave themselves to fasting and to prayer, and Esther decided that perhaps she was made for a moment such as this. And so she decided to go in to her husband, the king, very presumptuously, which could have cost her her life. But because the king favored her and loved her, he extended the scepter, received her into his presence, and she threw a banquet. And this banquet followed another, which uncovered the plot. And then the king learned that his wife was a Jewess and that she was wrapped up in the very order that this evil Haman manipulated the king to sign into law. And so the king then made adjustments. And every year, at a particular time of year, the Jews celebrate what's called the Feast of Purim. And it has to do with commemorating the events of the story of Esther. Now, we may not necessarily lay down some celebratory holiday as a result of what we've been through. But the one thing we can take away from the unexpected is that God always shows up when it's time. God hasn't abandoned us. God is still with us. And perhaps He is using the occasion to refine us, to get us to focus on Him, and to love our neighbors as ourselves. So, when you face the unexpected, don't be dismayed. Look to God and rely on Him. And if there's anything we can do to serve you in the meantime, feel free to reach out and contact us. Thanks, and have a good evening.